Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for those who have joined. My name is Amber Scott, and I'm the Director of Communications for Salvation and Social Justice. It is my pleasure to have you all here on the Black Church and the COVID-19 vaccine panel discussion. At this time, I am going to turn it over to our founding director, the Reverend Dr. Charles Boyer.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It is always good to be with so many sisters and brothers in clergy and the faith, the Black church community, and beyond. Today, we really get into some really critical information, and I think in ways in which the church has not been challenged since the yellow fever. When I think about my AME tradition and Richard Allen and how the AME churches were involved in the yellow fever pandemic that broke all throughout South Jersey and Philadelphia, I don't think we've seen anything of those likes since. Salvation and Social Justice is committed to eliminating barriers and to accessing proper healthcare resources and educational tools. In October, we published a healthcare report titled Break Every Chain from Cradle to COVID-19, Racism in New Jersey Healthcare and the Call for Justice. And in this report, we proclaim healthcare is a human right and called for the transforming of public health to center and to protect Black lives. We really see health as critical and center to all of the various focus areas, whether it be criminal justice, economic, so forth and so on. Health is at the center. And so we're committed to the abolition, restoration, and transformation of our community's health. So that being said, this panel, the Black Church and the COVID-19 vaccine, is a critical opportunity to maintain this commitment and to educating Black faith communities, particularly in our communities at large, about various healthcare resources. Many faith leaders express how many questions they're receiving from their congregations. So this is a time to ask those tough questions and to get informed and to be transparent about answers from experts. Sisters and brothers, this panel of sisters are really par excellence. And so we want to equip you with a full breadth of knowledge to make the most informed decision about taking the COVID vaccine. SNSJ, we are in favor of the vaccine, but that does not supersede anyone making an informed decision for themselves and their family. But this decision should also be made in consultation with your medical provider. Let me just say, for me, in my decision to take the vaccine, I have known one of our panelists, Dr. Natalie Mitchem, for many years. And so I have read, studied, watched everything that she has said about that. I have known and followed Dr. Pernell's work for several years. And so knowing folks that I trust has made that decision easy for me. And so now, sisters and brothers, I would like to present to you the host for this event today. Also, one of our newly elected board members to give greetings, the Reverend Dr. Leslie Devereaux.
Good afternoon. I'm hoping you all can hear me. Probably can't see me, but I hope you can hear me. I want to first thank Dr. Boyer, who is my brother beloved, and Reverend Brian McAllister, who has become my little brother beloved, for coming together. Dr. Boyer is correct. I sit on his board, but we also sit on other social action committees within the AME church and within the community. And so we thought it not robbery when we shared about the different questions that the church was having to try to come together and bring everyone together so that questions might be answered with respect to the vaccine. I want to personally thank the panelists. I don't know Dr. Pernell, but I've heard many good things about her. Natalie Mitchem is my sister beloved and worked with her on many initiatives. And Dr. Mary Flannelly, I am on the board at Monmouth Medical, the advisory board. And all I had to do is reach out. They've been very supportive, Monmouth Medical Center in Long Branch, where my church is. And they were the ones that put me in contact with Miss Flannelly, Dr. Flannelly, that she might offer some input as well. I'm not going to hold you long. I'm not feeling well. I'm going to be full disclosure. I have COVID. I just found out on Friday. I woke up Thursday feeling really bad and aching all over my body. I thought I had a cold because I don't go anywhere. And then Friday morning, I woke up and I felt even worse. So I went to the doctor and I was told that I had COVID. And not only now do I have COVID, but my entire house has COVID. And so it's rough. It really is rough. I can't even, unless you've experienced it, I can't even explain to you what the last few days have been like for us. I would ask you to keep us in prayer, but I also would say that I think that this whole forum is even more important now. This whole dynamic about whether we should take the vaccine, because I'm telling you, when my 90 days are up, if my doctor says it's okay, I will be taking the vaccine, and so will everyone in my household. So thank you very much. Look forward to a productive conversation here on today.
Thank you, Dr. Devereaux. And now to the Director of Black Church Affairs for Salvation and Social Justice, who helped organize this event, to give us some remarks, the Reverend Brian McAllister.
Thank you, Dr. Charles Boyer. God bless everyone. We are in a critical moment where the Black community has faced multi-pandemics of COVID-19, blatant brutality against our bodies by the police, inequities across education, the justice system, and more. And so inside of this, we find refuge and comfort in being reminded of sacred spirituals like Balm in Gilead, which represents irresistible hope and powerful resistance. There is a balm in Gilead answers the prophet Jeremiah's question. Is there no balm in Gilead? Filled with hope and resistance, this song, first sung by our enslaved ancestors who were dehumanized and under much oppression, will still answer the affirmative. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. This song is a proclamation of what newness and healing can occur. And it all starts with Jesus being the true balm in Gilead for all people hurting in the world. And so to even go further, there are even historical parallels between the Bible and medicine in America. For example, in the Bible, we know the story of the slave Onesimus, whose name means beneficial, useful, or handy. He encounters the Apostle Paul, who converts him to Christ. And Paul writes Onesimus' master and says, Onesimus was useful to you, but now he has become useful to both you and to me. And this is a direct parallel to a West African slave who was purchased in Boston in 1706. His master named him Onesimus. Onesimus brilliantly discovered smallpox inoculation, basically a vaccine, this West African slave. And ultimately, Onesimus saved hundreds of lives, and his discovery led to the eventual eradication of smallpox. And so we are not here today to force this vaccine upon you, but we are here to think what healing critically looks like for our community, to understand the concerns which we rightfully, historically are founded in America's treatment of Black people in medicine and the dark history of medical experimentations on Black Americans. And we are here today to consider the vaccine and seek to move forward with healing. And so with that being said, I will now turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Crystal Charlie Sibley, to moderate the discussion with our esteemed panelists.
Thank you so much, Reverend Brian McAllister. Greetings, everyone. My name is Crystal Charlie Sibley, and I am the Director of Black Health Equity for Salvation and Social Justice. You know, we'd be remiss if we didn't even go even further into the historical context, which brings us here today. Why we have reservations regarding the vaccine and the treatment specifically for the Black community. Today, we are here to discuss the COVID-19 vaccine in the Black community. However, before we begin that conversation, it is important to address what I assume to be an elephant in the room. Black Americans have had their trust violated by the medical system many, many times throughout history. There is our dear sister, Henrietta Lacks, who unknowingly donated her cells to Johns Hopkins in 1951, beginning what was the first, and for many years, the only human cell line able to reproduce indefinitely. Her cells, known as HeLa cells for Henrietta Lacks, remain a durable line of cells used in research around the world to this day. There is a Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the African American male, conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service and the CDC. This was an unethical study conducted between 1932 and 1972. Black men who participated in this study were told they were receiving free health care from the federal government. However, researchers were studying untreated syphilis and never informed participants of their diagnosis and disguised placebos. There are other stories that we could uplift in addition to these, but they all speak to the reason we continuously proclaim that Black Lives Matter. And we want to promote the protection of Black lives amid learning about and receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. With that being said, we have three amazing panelists who will lead our conversation today. First, we have none other than Dr. Chris T. Pernell, Chief Strategic Integration and Health Equity Officer, University Hospital, Newark, New Jersey. Reverend Natalie Mitchem, Executive Director of International Health Commission for the AME Church, and Dr. Mary Gayle Flannelly, Clinical Pharmacist for the Monmouth Medical Center. Today's format, we'd like to take an opportunity to hear from each of these panelists, but also know that we want to hear from you. And so with that being said, we will leave a substantial amount of time for Q&A at the end. And as questions come to mind, please feel free to put them in the chat, as we are going to do our best to address every single question today. Now, let us hear from our panelists. Dr. Chris Pernell, could you please provide your 2-minute take on the vaccine?
Sure. So as was introduced, I'm Dr. Chris. I like to tell people I am a public health physician, and that is as much a profession as a purpose and calling for me. I am a Black woman who has been personally impacted by this pandemic. I lost my father on August 13th, 2020 to this pandemic, a 78-year-old heroic soul. In addition, I've lost 2 cousins to date. And my sister, my oldest sister, Kim Maria, is a breast cancer survivor and what we call a COVID-19 long hauler. So if you think about the legacy of that, I needed a way to solution and be a part of beating back this pandemic. So I enrolled in a coronavirus vaccine trial. So I've been fully vaccinated since October, and I needed to demonstrate that accountability. So given that Black and brown communities have been disproportionately impacted, higher exposure rates, higher hospitalization rates, and higher mortality rates, I don't want my people left with disproportionate risk without having the necessary tools to protect themselves. So I definitely support and affirm vaccination, but more importantly, I understand the historical injustices, and I'm here to help people along their decision journey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pernell. Now we would like to hear from Dr. Natalie Mitchem with respect to the same.
Thank you very much. And so as being a pastor, ordained clergy, and also working as a registered dietitian and nutritionist, as Dr. Pernell said, my heart goes out to the fact that we need to understand that people of color, African Americans, we rank the highest in every preventable disease that you can think of. And if we go back for a second, when we first heard about COVID-19, one of the things they told us about is if we would wear a mask, physical distance, or they said social distance, frequently wash our hands, those public health entities that are available to us, we could prevent it. But we didn't do so well with that. So again, as a pastor, as a clergy, as a registered dietitian, when it comes to the vaccine or any preventable disease, I'm about us teaching how to take care of our body. As a pastor, using the word not to invoke fear, not using the word as a weapon, but using the word of God to empower and equip, as Dr. Boyer says. So finding ways through our Bible study, through our sermons, through our Sunday school, to allow our memberships, the faith-based community to be informed. And then as a registered dietitian, we understand clearly that a healthy immune system helps us to respond to vaccines. Also, again, helps us to prevent certain preventable diseases. So again, helping people to understand it is important to eat healthy, to wear that mask, to have restorative sleep, to exercise, to manage, to do stress management. And again, all of that can come together in the faith-based context. Sometimes we just focus on the spiritual part, but we are whole people. Our whole body comes into a church as we are fellowshipping and doing what we do at church. And so when we consider the vaccine, getting informed about it so we can make that informed decision. And then also, when you think about this, anybody who takes any form of medication, a Tylenol, aspirin, Tums, Benadryl, you name it, I ask you to take a look at the bottle. There's a warning on the bottle. But why do you take the medication? For your health, for your family. The doctor has informed you of the benefits of it. So there's risks we take every day. So we ask you to be informed. And finally, if many of us of a certain age, look at your left arm. On your left arm, there is the marking or reminder of a vaccine you got many years ago. And look how many years it has been and the benefit that it kept you from getting a particular disease. So let's not operate in fear. And I don't mean to use that as a part of a scripture as a weapon, but let us get informed.
Thank you so much, Reverend Mitchell. Now we will hear from Dr. Flannelly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Mary Gayle Flannelly. I'm a pharmacist at Monmouth Medical Center, have been for over 30 years now. I am very fortunate that I have not had any family dealings with the COVID vaccine. I am blessed, frankly, having to go to work every day and in the hospital and deal with patients who have been admitted, and it's very, very disheartening to deal with on a daily basis. But we are getting better. We have medications that we didn't have at the onset of this disease. Things are getting better, and now we have vaccines. We have 2 vaccines which have been okayed by the FDA and the CDC for emergency use here in the United States. They're the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine. And we have a third that just recently got the emergency use authorization, and that's made by Johnson & Johnson, and that will be a game changer. So getting vaccinated is very, very important. You've heard talk about variants of this, of the coronavirus. This will make things more difficult for us if we do not get vaccinated. So they want everyone who can get vaccinated to do so. And I've been vaccinated, being that working in hospital, the healthcare workers are more at risk, and we're in like the 1A category, 1B category for getting vaccinated. So I'm very happy and very blessed for that. But I do want to go back to the fact that, yes, African-American community was at the top of the list as far as getting infections by the virus. And part of what's due to that, there's many things that play into that, but part of it is that we had other problems such as hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and so on and so forth, that made us more susceptible to falling prey to the virus. So definitely pay attention to your health. Pay attention to your health. Visit your doctor during this time. And if you have medications, if you've been diagnosed with something and you've been prescribed medications, take your meds and keep track of your numbers. Get educated, because as the Lord told us, watch and pray. Watch and pray. So you have to watch, know your information, as well as pray for better days. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you know what, speaking of knowing and understanding, can we just have a brief time now to kind of talk about what the development process of the vaccine looked like? I guess maybe Dr. Flannelly, would you like to take that? Can you describe for us what the development looked like for this vaccination? You know, the rollout was relatively quickly for some, and but there's a reason for it. So
Yeah.
would you like to take that?
Well, the 2 vaccines which are available, which got what we term EAU, emergency use authorization, from the FDA. They do this because when you have something like the coronavirus that befell the nation, actually the world, it's a pandemic, it's the entire world. You have to be quick in response. So they couldn't go through the normal channels, and they have this quick route, which is always has been there, but we don't normally have to use it. So in this route, they took the vaccines through that. And these 2 vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, are what they call messenger RNA vaccines, or mRNA vaccines. They have been using this platform of mRNA for years. They've been working on it for years, but it actually came to be used because it would be the quickest to get a vaccine into the public, to get it through the different decision-making processes. So let's take this mRNA vaccine, and the vaccine, 2 steps that two things have to be done before people receive medications such as vaccines to the general public. And that's that the medication has to be proven effective, and it has to be proven that it's safe. So first was the safety, and that's you go through clinical trials and they prove safety, and then you go through clinicals, then you continue to the next phase in the clinical trials where they prove effectiveness. Now, both of the messenger RNA vaccines were proven to be safe. They're proven to be safe. And going back, when I'm sort of jumped ahead of myself, in the clinical trials, they pull in people that you try to get your participants in the clinical trials to look as much like the general public as possible. And we had a representation of African-American community was around 30%, 35% of those who participated in the clinical trials. And as you can hear from our history, what what has happened in the past. It's a little difficult to get African Americans to volunteer to be a part of clinical trials, but we had good representation this time. We're at 35%, and that was wonderful. So going back, they proved the effectiveness and the safety of the vaccine. And that was done for all of these vaccines. And then it is released to the public. So I believe that's it.
Can I add just 2 quick points to that, if you don't
Sure.
mind?
Sure.
I'd like to explain to people 3 salient facts I want them to remember. 1, the technology is not new. We knew a considerable amount around messenger RNA technology because of previous scientific studies that have been done around their use in cancer and other entities. Okay, so we were primed for an opportunity to be able to deploy it in this scenario. 2, we learned a lot from similar outbreaks in the past. Coronavirus belongs to, or I should say SARS-CoV-2 belongs to a family of coronaviruses. So it is similar to the SARS outbreak and even similar to the MERS outbreak. MERS was in the Middle East. SARS was more widespread, but we learned a lot about coronaviruses. The coronavirus, if you think about the pictures that you've seen, there's this circle and it has these spikes around it. So we learned from those 2 previous outbreaks that if you attack that spike protein, the coronavirus itself would be susceptible, meaning that it could be destroyed or neutralized. So the fact that messenger RNA technology was being perfected in the lab, plus we were learning about coronaviruses more broadly and generally, those 2 things combined together allowed messenger RNA vaccines against SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus or COVID 2019 in a rapid pace. It is quicker than most people are used to. On average, vaccine development can take 7 to 10 years, but the technology in and of itself is different, and the science gave us a leg up. We didn't have to grow proteins in a lab, and we didn't have to grow proteins, we mean in the scientific community. I didn't do the study myself. The protein didn't have to be grown in a chicken egg. Okay, so it's different. The other thing I want people to know that made it very different is that the federal government put money into the process in a very smart way. And please pay attention to this, because this is something that we as informed citizens need to be able to advocate around in the future. The federal government put money into the process so that drug companies would not only study the testing of the particular vaccine candidate, meaning whether it was safe and effective, but at the same time, they would study and evaluate the manufacturing process. Something that used to happen sequentially, one after the other, happened in parallel. That cut down the discovery time. And the last thing, the federal government's infusion of funding dollars allowed drug companies to raise very large scale trials. I told you that I was a participant in the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine trial. I was one of 30,000 people. Pfizer had approximately 44,000 people. That is unheard of. Typically, clinical research, and especially vaccines, don't involve that number of people. That magnitude allows the researchers to understand at a quicker pace potential adverse reactions, if any were to occur, likely side effects. Okay, so those 3 facts I wanted to make sure everyone understood. This is quicker than we're used to, but the science didn't cut any corners.
I'd like to add, I think Dr. Pernell, with you saying that helps us to move forward from the Tuskegee study and helps us to move forward from Helen and what happened with ourselves, meaning that this is a worldwide pandemic. And to your point, this research and the way that it's been studied and that all eyes are on this. So this helps us to understand that they're looking for the efficacy of the vaccine, more people participated in it. So it gives it a broader way where we can add to having trust in what we're hearing from the scientists, from those in public health. It takes us, and again, just moving us forward. So I think, thank you very much for adding that.
And Ms. Mitchell? Ms. Mitchell, I think that bears repeating that these vaccines were not developed strictly with the Black population in mind. This is a pandemic. These vaccines are going to be used across the entire populace of the country. So that in that respect, it differs from the historical, things that happened in the past, such as the Tuskegee experiments.
Thank you all. Yes, I have started the vaccination process personally. I received my first dose of Pfizer just about 2 weeks ago. And when people ask me what brought me to that place, to get beyond Tuskegee and to get beyond Henrietta Lacks, the thing that I always said, because I'm not a scientist, but one of the things that I've said to kind of, sum up the conversation was the fact that it was being tested among such a wide variety of people, and it's going to be given to everyone. But most importantly, what helped me to make my decision was the fact that you started out with your healthcare providers, those who are equipped to save us all. And if you're going to give this to them first, and there's something wrong, and when you're looking along the lines of Tuskegee, then we're all pretty much doomed. If this wasn't on the up and up. And that's really one of the places I found comfort outside of the science itself, right? I mean, sometimes we've had barriers to trusting the science, but looking at it like that in a very pragmatic way, like, if if you give it to all your doctors, then no one's going to be left to service this population. And and we're all trying to get on the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to move into some of our questions from the chat and questions that have been pre-submitted. However, one thing I would like just another little bit of clarity on, just for our listeners with regard to the vaccines. Can you tell us what, if any, are the major differences? And, do people have a choice in selecting their vaccine, and what things might lead to a certain vaccine being better for one person or another? And that's whoever want to jump in first, please feel
I'll
free.
start, and so I just wanted to piggyback off of something that was said. I think it's very important for everyone to understand how unprecedented the diversity was in both the Moderna and Pfizer trial. Roughly, and I put the link in, I'll try to put as much information into the chat box that I can. Moderna, 37% of those who participated in the Moderna trial were persons of color. 20% were Latino, approximately 10% were Black or African American. 25% were roughly 65 and older, and roughly around 17% had chronic health conditions. Pfizer had similar diversity representation. Latinos were slightly higher, around 26%, but again, Blacks were around 10%, and 65 and older were about 21%. That's going to be relevant because questions are going to come up. If I have these conditions, can I take it? The vaccines are technically similar, meaning Pfizer and Moderna are technically the same for safety and efficacy. Okay,
sure.
They're both messenger RNA vaccines.
Last name is Haygood, H-A-Y.
The differences are around whether or not they can be stored at ultra cold, whether or not they have to be stored at ultra cold temperatures, whether or not they can be stored at room temperature, what their shelf life is. So that impacts how you store it, that impacts where you can administer it, and things of that nature. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I get asked this question a lot, can I go to a site and choose which one I want? No. Take whichever vaccine is available to you, because they're both technically the same and they do the same things. Both are roughly 94 and 95% effective at preventing symptomatic coronavirus disease. In addition to that, both have very similar side effects or safety profiles. So there isn't any meaningful difference around that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pernell. I really appreciate that. The next question was location. How do we address the fact that in some areas where Black people reside, vaccine is not possible? They have to travel far without cars, transportation to get vaccinated. What are we doing there? Why are we seeing this, and how do we address this? And also, just as a side note, if you could just remember to mute your microphones if you're not speaking at this time. Thank you so much.
When we will all be together in joint session, and I wanted to focus.
Well, we know, I could start that there is an all-out effort to get the vaccine to more locations. I think that we've all heard on the news that they're doing their best to get them out to local pharmacies. And certainly persons are writing in and letting their local legislator know or their doctor know that if that particular pharmacy is not located in their area. So for example, if you don't have a Walgreens, letting them know I don't have one here, but we do have this. We also know that some supermarkets in some areas have them. But if there's not one in your location, again, reach out to your local representative, reach out to doctors, reach out to health departments to let them know how far you are from a particular area where you would qualify for a vaccination so that the word can get out, so that as they're trying to figure out where to get these vaccines to, they'll be informed about that. The other thing is in the faith-based community, I do know that either locally churches are finding out how they can partner with a health department in order to, or a doctor's office or a hospital, partner with them to offer their facility to be a vaccination site. You have to have people qualified to give the vaccination. So that's why the partnership is also important. So you might want to call, again, their local hospital, the health department, your doctor, and say, hey, we have this space. In the AME Church, we, on the International Health Commission, we are also actively in discussions about having possibly vans, mobile vans that go around in different locations that we are working actively to identify to get the vaccination out. Looking at some of our churches, our website is www.amechealth.org. Again, that's www.amechealth.org. I'll put that in the chat box, but we actually have a survey there. And in that survey, you can go there and fill out for us if you would be interested in being a vaccination site, what your space looks like. And there's additional questions because there's, as Dr. Pernell, Dr. Flannelly would say, there's a lot of protocol that has to be in place. So as a clergy person, I just can't raise my hand and say, I want to get the vaccine. We have to have qualified persons, but you may have the space. So that's what the survey asks you. It asks you, do you have the space? Are you willing? Not only that, the survey asks you, if the van showed up within a week, are you ready for your site to open? What does your PPE look like? Do you need funding to support that? So I'm offering that as a suggestion that maybe you are part of a faith-based community. Maybe, again, you can reach out to the health department or another entity that I might not think of right now to find out how you can get it into your area. And certainly reaching out, as S and J would have us do, reach out to those who can yell for you and say, hey, we need the vaccine over in this area.
Thank you so much, Reverend Mitchum. Yes, we'll gladly ring the alarm for you if you are in need and you're not seeing the vaccine in your area. Please never never hesitate to reach out to Salvation and Social Justice. The next question that comes in was, is there any information on longevity of protection from the vaccines? Will we need it every 5 years? Will we need any, vaccines? What is the science telling us about the longevity of the vaccine?
May I speak to that point?
Yeah.
Right now, we don't have an answer on the longevity of the vaccine. Both Moderna, I believe Moderna, right? I don't think Pfizer is right now, at least I haven't heard it, but Moderna is working on developing booster shots for the vaccine because we don't know how long it will last. But as I said, also, there are variants that are coming out. We have a variant from South Africa. There's a variant from Europe, from the UK, and we have to address these variants. These are variations in the original virus. So the boosters are being developed, which we may have to take. to the original vaccine. So that speaks to like elongating the time that we'll have another layer of protection, which is what vaccination is, another layer of protection added to your PPE. And once you get vaccinated, you still have to continue with the washing of the hands, wearing of your mask, social distancing. This is an additional layer of protection against the coronavirus. And if I could also see, as far as vaccinations and the difference in the actual vaccines, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines have to be refrigerated, have to be, well, actually we store them in freezers, and the Pfizer vaccine is in a very cold freezer, minus 60 degrees. So they have to be unfrozen, reconstituted, placed into syringes rather quickly, and move. Their expiration is rather quick. So that would decrease the different sites that they'd be available at. So I'm not really sure how they're going to handle that, but at least they will be going initially to various pharmacies who are able to handle that, and areas such as that. Now, Johnson & Johnson, their product is different. Their product does not require these cold storage requirements that were difficult with the first two. And hopefully we'll be able to get that out into more rural areas. So that's something to pay attention to. And as far as websites, where I've put in, made available a website where you can register to get vaccinated. There are different sites that are up and working in our area. And I believe Brookdale has a super site for vaccination. And you can go there, but you have to register first. You have to register first. So hopefully we'll be able to get that website rather up.
Thank you so much. The next question we have is, I'm in the high-risk group for getting the vaccine, and I'm looking forward to getting it, but everywhere I register in Burlington County, the vaccine is not available. And the part two to that question was the booster question, but I think we've sufficiently addressed that. I do know that for Burlington County, if you've registered on the state website, you must also register at virtua.org/vaccine. And is my understanding that they open up the appointments as the shipment comes in. I will put that website in the chat, but not everyone was aware you had to register both places for the Burlington mega site. And I believe we've already addressed Essex in the chat. The link to register in Essex, you can also find the chat. It's essexcovid.org. So there was a question from one of the attendees. Is it true that mRNA cannot change your DNA?
I'll take that. mRNA does not interfere with your DNA. I use my hands a lot. I'm also a professor. So when you think about these messenger RNA vaccines, what I want you to think about is the cell. And this big circle is the cell. My fist is the nucleus. It's the center of the cell. The DNA is inside of the nucleus. The messenger RNA, which normally occurs in your body, does not enter the nucleus. So this vaccine does not change your DNA. This vaccine does not impact your fertility. There is nothing in the science suggestive that it impacts fertility. This vaccine does not give you coronavirus. I want to repeat those three things, because if you look at the literature, meaning you read the polls and the surveys that have been done, and more importantly, if you just talk to people, I spend a lot of time talking to people. And let me be very, very clear about this. I'm a very transparent person. I love people, I love faith, and I love public health. I am a public health physician because this is my calling. I don't do this to lie to my people. I don't do this to lie to my community. I do this to help my community and all communities to understand the science, to be able to decode and to digest it. I lost my father to this pandemic, okay? A very heroic Black man, a Black man who came up in the Jim Crow South, a Black man who came north, like so many Blacks, escaping the racial terror of lynching in Jim Crow. My father started out at Bell Labs cutting grass because that's the only job he could qualify for. My father went from cutting grass to becoming a research scientist, a level of success that is usually reserved for people who have master's and PhD degrees. My father had none of that, right? He had faith in himself, and both faith in Yahweh, a higher power, and he was a hard worker. I tell you that because that man raised me to be able to understand the power of science. And because our people have been harmed by white supremacy, because science has too often been a tool of white supremacy, it is rational for there to be fear. It is rational for there to be skepticism, and it is rational for there to be concerns. It is not my job to convince anyone, but as a public health physician, it is my job to ensure that you understand the risk and you understand the science. So I needed to say that because if we in our community don't feel heard and validated, that's what allows misinformation, and that's what allows the myths to continue to build. And we've already lost enough. We've lost too much. We have been devastated by this pandemic. Black and brown people, Black people specifically, we are 2 times more likely to die from this disease because of the jobs that we work and because of the chronic health conditions that we have. We are higher at exposure, we are higher at infection, we are higher at hospitalization. And it is important that we know how to protect ourselves. Vaccination is one tool. My dad used to always say to me, follow the data, follow the science. And I heard that in my head as I signed up for this trial. And so 2 other things I have to say because I see them written here. One, when I participated in the vaccine trial, and this is true of all vaccine trials that are double-blinded, that's a term that is referred to. I did not know whether I received placebo, saline, or whether or not I received the actual vaccine. That was true until just after the new year. The researcher did not know whether I received the actual placebo or whether or not I received the vaccine. Because I'm a healthcare worker and I work at University Hospital, I was a part of the priority population. Being a part of the priority population, I had an opportunity to be vaccinated. So that's why I got unblinded. I couldn't take advantage of the opportunity to get vaccinated unless I knew whether or not I had already received the vaccine. So there were other leaders at our hospital. Our CEO, Dr. Elmahal, even participated. He didn't get the actual vaccine in the trial. I did. So that's how you see the chance. So I've been vaccinated since my first shot on August 31st and my second shot on October 2nd. I had the side effects that people in here are talking about, and I have to speak to them. I had the fatigue. It was worse with my second injection. I had consistent headaches. They usually didn't last more than 3 or so days. I had a very slight bump in my temperature, about 99.9. I never had a frank fever. I never had chills. But I did have those 3 things I described: a slight bump in my temperature, fatigue, and headaches. Most side effects last anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, some 72 hours, and then they're gone. The last thing I'll say before passing it for others to be able to speak, all of that is normal. That meant my immune system was working. That is what we call the inflammatory process. I was not infected with coronavirus. My immune system was working. You get more reactions, or I should say more side effects to the second shot, because the thought is that immune response is even stronger, more robust. And the last thing that I will say is I want to make sure everybody here understands what self-efficacy is and what is collective efficacy. It is the ability to make an informed choice and decision. And we all have agency in a community that has been so devastatingly impacted. We must be in the position to use that agency. So that's what this opportunity is today.
Wow, Dr. Pernell, thank you so much for your candor and being a credible messenger. Like that's one of the reasons why we're here, to break down these barriers of distrust. We rely on the credible messengers that are with us today. And so we thank you and all our panelists for definitely serving in that capacity for us. I know this is just a wealth of information. And let's continue on with our questions. Are there any people who should not take the vaccine, particularly people with autoimmune diseases?
Well, I'd like to answer that from perspective of the pharmacist. Folks who have had an anaphylactic reaction to a previous vaccine, and definitely if you had the first shot and you had an anaphylactic reaction, you should not proceed to the second shot. So anaphylactic reaction, what is that? Anaphylactic reaction is a side effect when you have an allergic reaction to a drug, a vaccine, whatever. It's very pronounced and it's very quick. It can cause things such as the swelling of your throat, you're unable to breathe. It can be a rash that covers the entire body. These things, they happen very, very quickly. So folks who have this type of reaction should not have the vaccine, or if you have a lot of allergies, have a conversation with your physician as to whether or not you should proceed with having the vaccine. I know a lot of sites have, at least what we did at Monmouth, it was a bit different. We had, you had to stop and be observed after you received your vaccination for 30 minutes to make sure that everything was fine and that your body received it well, that you had no anaphylactic reaction. And we also had like medication nearby, whereas if somebody had a reaction, we could counteract that. But having been said, everybody have a conversation with your physician. And autoimmune diseases, no, that was not in, it's not in the literature that you should not get vaccinated. Only thing that's in the literature is if you have had anaphylactic reactions to previous vaccines.
Can I just add that to something to clarify that point? I put the actual link from the CDC. So you could have had anaphylaxis from a shellfish allergy, and that's not necessarily a contraindication to the vaccination. If you had anaphylaxis to the first dose, you should not get the second dose. If you had anaphylaxis to any ingredients in the vaccine, you should not get the vaccine. If you develop an immediate allergic reaction within 4 hours of administration of the vaccine, you should not get the subsequent. Now there's a difference. I want you to parse the difference. As I said anaphylaxis versus immediate allergic reaction. As Dr. Flannelly was explaining, anaphylaxis is the closure of the throat. There are other types of allergic responses, as she was also explaining, hives, redness of the skin. They're also suggesting that group, if that happens immediately after your first dose, you shouldn't get the second dose. I have 2 relatives who have shellfish allergies and who have had anaphylaxis-like reactions to their shellfish allergies. They have tolerated the COVID-19 vaccine because they didn't have anaphylaxis to the first dose and they didn't have anaphylaxis to any of the ingredients in the COVID-19 vaccines that have currently been approved. And everywhere you go to get vaccinated, you must be observed. Every person must be observed for the minimum of 15 minutes. If you have a history of allergies, whether it's to food or whether it's to vaccine products, there are people who are allergic to the egg and flu vaccine. There are no eggs in the coronavirus vaccines that have been approved to date. Still, you will be observed for 30 minutes.
Thank you so much. So let's talk about this third vaccine, because we have a question coming in here. How do we respond when someone asks why they should trust a vaccine from Johnson & Johnson when they are being sued for knowingly selling a product with cancer-causing agents, which was found out more than 30 years later to be the case?
I can take that. And there's a related question in the chat box. So as an informed citizen, like self-efficacy, I'm going to go back to that. Everyone should feel like they have had an opportunity to ask any question about a vaccination that's going to be offered to you. I have to be very clear and emphatic on this. Vaccines do not cause autism. That misinformation grew out of a false study that was published in the literature, and then that study was retracted. But that study did a lot of damage to the scientific community, and we're still trying to undo the damage that that study caused, okay? So being a public health physician, I can't let that go unanswered. Two, we do know there are studies and there are even lawsuits that are being held around talcum powder and how talcum powder had been used in the propensity to cause malignancy and other issues. It is very important to know the science of this particular drug or this particular vaccine that you're putting into your body. We know that about various different drugs or vaccines that we put into our body. If you ever feel like you don't understand what you're doing, you should stop and you should ask more questions or you should read. That's just a baseline principle that I want everyone to operate under, especially because the historical injustices that our people have faced and because of the ongoing disparities that our people face. It's very important to do that. I learned that advocacy somewhat as a doctor, but I learned it best as a Black woman who has 2 chronic health conditions. And I learned it even more so fighting and advocating on behalf of my parents, both of which are deceased now, my mother from Parkinson's and my father from coronavirus. So I said all of that to say, everybody, do your homework, advocate for yourself, ask questions, don't feel pressured. This is a voluntary choice and decision, but don't make decisions out of misinformation. Make decisions out of fact. So the fact, both things can be true. It can be true that there are concerns around talcum powder, and it can be true that Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is so far proven to be safe. And I say so far proven to be safe because we only have the published data from the drug company. Now it's going through the process where the FDA has an advisory council. The FDA has career scientists. This is what they do. They will comb through the data, comb through the science to ensure that the data is accurate, that the vaccine is indeed safe. And so those things can both be true. And I think that's very important for others to know that. And I understand why our people distrust or are historically aware of those past experiences because they've caused harm to us. But it doesn't negate the fact that the science was not rushed. I have to repeat that. The science was not rushed. The science in and of itself was able to happen at a quicker pace because of the technology and because of the financing that was brought to the table. We should learn from this, and we should question why other diseases don't have access to the same level of funding. No, everything isn't at a pandemic level, but this can give us a sense of understanding of how when the government invests properly, when science is focused on one condition, we can arrive at answers at a pace that is faster than it had been before. Just because something is faster doesn't mean it was rushed or cut corners.
And Dr. Pernell, I thank you for that because I think that that's important. We were talking earlier about being informed, making an informed decision. When I was mentioning earlier, let us not operate out of fear, those in the faith-based community, we can find scriptures, again, your sermons, your Bible studies, your Sunday school, on how you can take these webinars. They're already here. You have experts that can answer the questions for you, because in the faith-based community, you don't have to be the expert. Utilize the webinars that you're watching now, re-show them in your churches, your Bible studies, get people informed. So again, they're not operating out of fear. As Dr. Pernell said, they're not operating out of misinformation, but they're being informed and realizing that so much went into the formulation of these vaccines so that you can make that informed decision for yourself. You know, the Bible talks about equipping and empowering the saints so that we can do work. Well, that's what we're trying to do. And then as we heard at the beginning, when you look at it, look at those that are also involved in the work, meaning that you are represented in the work. You are represented among those who have been a part of the trials. And it's so important too, as clergy, whatever level you operate within the church, I like to say this, with the vaccine, and as we move forward with the vaccine, remember what Dr. Flannelly said, the vaccine is one of the items we have. We got to still wear a mask. We have to still physical distance. We still have to make sure that we're washing our hands frequently. So clergy, I guess I'm just coming and speaking to you right now that we have work to do. You know, while let's not just wait for church to open. Let's not just wait to have church as usual, because we need to be informing and educating our parishioners using the Zoom platform to do that, and also getting ready for whenever you do open, or even if right now. Because here's the thing, we don't know how many people are vaccinated. We don't know when they'll be able to get vaccinated. So what do you have in place right now? Your PPE, do you have your barriers in place? And my brothers and sisters, preach the gospel, you ministers, your leaders, how are you role modeling? I was very impressed with our new president, President Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris, how they role modeled on January the 6th. They wore masks. They altered the attendants that were at the inauguration. When they had those ceremonies, if you continue to watch throughout the day, ceremonies that would have contained lots of people, they altered it. So those in the faith-based community, along with educating people about the vaccine, how are you educating yourself, going to be that role model? When we get back, it's going to take a while. We still have to understand how long, and certainly Dr. Pernell and Dr. Flannelly can speak more to this, and I think they've mentioned it. We still need to know how long the efficacy is for the vaccine, 6 months, a year, we don't know that. So when we do gather together, you'll have some in your church that will be vaccinated, some in your church that won't be vaccinated. What do you have in place to protect everybody? How are you going to role model it? You know, when you get in your preaching and, you know, we want to say, look at your neighbor. No, don't look at your neighbor. Okay. Give your neighbor a high five. No, don't give your neighbor a high five. You got to be the role model. I was at an event just recently, a small, very small wedding, just 6 people, because we can't have the large wedding. So just 6 people. As soon as they walked up to me, what did they want to do? Hug me. I had to be the role model and say, no, we're not hugging. Okay. I said to them, if you want me to do this wedding for 6 people, I'm wearing my mask. We have to get ready now as leaders to be that person that says, no, we're not hugging, we're not high-fiving, you're going to wear your mask. And guess what? You can preach with your mask on too. How are you preparing your choirs? How are you preparing your ushers? Because again, you don't know how many will be vaccinated and how many will, and it's going to take time. We see the rollout now. You may be in group A, 1B, and you're still waiting to be vaccinated. So how are we preparing people? We need to be conscious of that, and all that can take place through education. And we can be those voices because we have been voices to help inform the community on these important decisions, because not only that, we are public places. So you're going to have visitors that might start to come in. So how are we pulling it all together? Again, when I said earlier about not using the word of God as a weapon, what I meant is sometimes people say, you're scared, don't pick a scripture that puts them down. Pick a scripture that lifts people up so they will be informed. And again, it starts with us to be those role models and get our minds ready for as we navigate this vaccination and as it continues to roll out.
Thank you, Reverend Mitchum. So you know what, you made so many wonderful points in that. And, you know, one of the things, like you said, you don't know who's going to be vaccinated and who's not. So another question that we have, which is, what is the latest on whether people who are vaccinated can still act as vectors, can still transmit the virus if they don't get sick themselves, right? So that's another caveat to this. What does the data tell us about that?
So I can start. I didn't know if Dr. Flannelly was going to speak. So studies are ongoing, and this is another feature of when you know the science is ethical. Another feature of how science is an evolving process. So what we know today is not what we'll ever know about the vaccine, right? So we're continuing to learn. So Pfizer has done some additional tests, as well as Moderna. And I believe AstraZeneca has also looked at this in their vaccine. Their vaccine isn't approved in the US, but want to know if you're vaccinated, yes, it prevents symptomatic disease. For Johnson & Johnson, it prevents severe disease at an 85% of severe disease. But can you still be an asymptomatic carrier? What we know from the science and the data that has emerged so far is that it looks like it decreases your ability to transmit the virus to someone else. Doesn't eliminate it altogether. And because it does not eliminate it altogether, you still need to wear your mask. You still need to physical distance, and you still need to wash your hands, and you still need to avoid cramped and crowded indoor spaces. Okay, so let's all do and act off of the science that we know. That's the nature of science. Science is a creative process. It's framed by rules and laws, but it's a creative process. And so we're learning as we go. And the FDA had criteria in place for a vaccine to be approved under EUA, emergency use authorization. The vaccine had to be at least 50% effective in reducing moderate to severe disease. These two messenger RNA vaccines are 94 and 95%, and J&J's, which is not a messenger RNA, it is a viral vector, a weakened adenovirus as a vector carrying in the spike proteins. That is 85% effective against severe disease.
Thank you so much. And just
And
for
if I may piggyback off of what Dr. Pernell said, yes, there's continuing science going on with this. We were talking earlier about adverse reactions. There actually is a site that the CDC has set up. It is called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting Site. VAERS, VAERS. This site is, they want you to report any adverse reactions, any allergic reactions that you may have had after receiving the shot that were problematic to you. So they're tracking this throughout the country, because once the vaccine is released, we were talking before about the clinical trials, and you have a large group of people in the clinical trials. But once the vaccine is released, the entire populace, you have a larger group of people. So you get a better idea of the adverse reactions that could be out there. Now, this site, as I said, is VAERS, VAERS. And I'll put it in the chat site, get it out for folks to be aware of. If you have any adverse reactions to the vaccine, that is where they should be reported. Everybody's paying strict attention to these vaccines.
Thank you so much. As a point of clarity, I did see in the chat where it says that Crystal says that it's going to be given to everyone. Does that mean it is decided we will be forced if we choose we don't want the virus? So just for a point of clarification, when I said that it would be given to everyone, I was speaking in layman's terms outside of scientific data. I was referring to the fact that during the trials, and even the fact that this vaccination is going to be given to everyone, meaning it's not, unlike Tuskegee, it was not solely being given to Black men. That was where the everyone came from. So I wouldn't want anyone to leave this discussion misinformed, or certainly say that Crystal indicated that everyone is going to be given it without a choice. That certainly wasn't what that statement was meant to convey. Another question was, how can a homebound bedridden person and their caregiver get the vaccine? I know we kind of talked about transportation earlier on and some of the things that the AME Church is looking to do, but outside of someone who just literally just cannot get out, is there or are there any mechanisms for in-home vaccinations under these type of conditions?
So what you're going to see and what we need to see if we're solving for equity, we need to see opportunities to get the vaccine to where people are, right? So right now, as we're going through priority populations, and I can only speak about this in general terms, right? Because the scenarios will be unique. But what we see happening with priority populations, hospitals were sites where the vaccine was being administered to healthcare workers. Long-term care facilities were sites where the vaccine was being administered to residents and or workers. Then we began to expand that eligibility. And as we have been expanding that eligibility, you had sites that were set up by cities or sites that were set up by counties or sites set up by the states. More and more, what has to happen if we are to achieve herd immunity by vaccination process has to become more mobile. So it has to get closer to where people are in their community. So now the next phase of that, you see the talk by the Biden administration about vaccines being made available at local pharmacies. Progressively, this has to occur. And this is where having J&J will be really helpful. J&J is one shot, and J&J does not have to be stored at the ultra cold temperatures of Pfizer and or Moderna, and has a longer refrigerator shelf life. So having those multiple tools and options are really going to prove useful in achieving that 70, 75%, and even 85% of the American population being vaccinated. I want to say one last thing about herd immunity, because I'm trying to answer things as I see them. That's why you see me on my computer. So herd immunity, other than by vaccination, is genocide. There are over 465,000 Americans who are dead. There are 26 million plus Americans who have been infected. If we allow this virus to just rip through with no public health measures in place, with no effort to prepare tools like vaccines, that would be genocide, because the death toll and the morbidity, so meaning chronic disease but not death, would be even more devastating than what it is now. And our communities would be even more disproportionately impacted than they are now. So the goal is to get to high rates of vaccinations among US adults so we can finally beat back this pandemic, so we can prevent people from getting illness, from getting sick from coronavirus, and so that our lives can return to some form of normality. I will never get my father back. I will never get my cousins back. But if I can prevent some other family from having to experience that, I'm going to do everything in my power. What we do for our patient population here, we've lost approximately 12 staff members at University Hospital. And I don't want to see our staff further decimated or devastated by this pandemic. So making these tools available and making them increasingly available in community where people live will necessarily have to become a priority and a focus so we can achieve health equity.
And so if
that's about the herd immunity is anywhere, it's quoted anywhere from 70 to 85%.
70, 85, yes.
I saw Laura's question.
And I was going to say, just don't forget to use your voice. We said that earlier, as Dr. Pernell was saying, all those areas are getting ready to roll out, but don't sit at home and not make contact with a health department, with your doctor, with your health provider, and say, hey, you know, I'm homebound, we're in need of this vaccination. How can we connect with it? You mentioned earlier, connecting with salvation and justice, however you can do it. In other words, I'm just encouraging you, don't sit home and not let someone know what you're in need of. And then real quickly, don't forget too, it was mentioned earlier, since we, people of color, we were at higher risk for this because of those pre-existing diseases, diabetes type 2, hypertension, obesity, and on and on. It's February, heart disease, preventing heart disease month. We've got to eat healthy, everybody. I have to say that as a registered dietitian. We've got to eat healthy. I go back to my clergy. We've got to serve healthier food. You all get ready. I know you want to get back to church and you want to have those celebrations, but guess what? You know what I'm going to say. Guess what? We've got to serve healthier food. We love our members. We need to love them with some healthy food. We need to give them choices. We need to help them fight this diabetes, hypertension,
Yes.
heart disease, and stroke, to put us at lower risk for these diseases. We can do something about it. No more making the excuse. People always say, well, they'll say to me, well, people, you got to have a sweet once in a while. You talk to people about what they eat all the time. Most of the time you're having the sweet. Most of the time you're having the soda. Very rarely are you drinking the water. Somebody say amen, that's all right. But we need to eat healthier, serve healthier food. Bodies need to be hydrated, drinking more water, restorative sleep, fitness, and managing our stress. Those are additional things that you can also preach, teach, however you want to in your congregations, along with the word. There's so many scriptures you can add to that. Jesus went into the synagogues preaching and teaching the good news. Well, there's good news that you can prevent. There's some diseases that are preventable, and we need to get that in place and use your voice to let people know that.
Well, amen. We were talking about herd immunity, and we were talking about not sitting quietly, and we cannot leave out our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. And so how do we address the lack of information available about the vaccine to incarcerated populations who, despite being eligible and offered the vaccine, may be refusing for the very understandable concerns mentioned on this Zoom today?
I think we have to be those messengers, right? So I also sit on the Essex County Correctional Facility Civilian Task Force, and this is an issue that we're talking about for the detainees and the inmates. And so what's happening in Essex County, you're seeing inmates and or detainees begin to get vaccinated. Those living in any type of congregate setting, whether it's in a prison or a jail, or whether it's at a long-term care facility, a nursing home, or whether it is college, your risk of exposure and your risk of the infection spreading is higher. So that is also an aim and a focus of equity. So we need to make this information available, and of those of you who can advocate is advocating on the behalf of those who are, justice involved populations to have access to that.
And there are many ministries that have prison ministries. So along with that, you could make sure when you're going in to visit those in the prison, and if you can't visit them right now, sharing the information through flyers, through websites, through Zoom. If you're Zooming with those who are in prison, you can be an important advocate and a liaison to get the information to them, find out what's going on, what they need, and then you can help get the word out to the powers that be in a community to let them know what those who are in prison are stand in need of. So this is something to add to your prison ministry, with many faith-based communities do have prison ministries.
Thank you so much. We have another question here. I'm trying to roll through them. We have quite a few. How can communication announcements of vaccine events be improved in Black communities? For example, Caucasian populations who show up in Black communities for the vaccines and people of color have not been informed of the vaccination event.
Well, again, I'll take it to start with. I do think that we need to find out those who are in leadership, could be the clergy, or maybe you have someone who's assigned to your social action. We need to make sure that we are investigating, searching for information to get to our community, if that is helpful. So we need to, as with all of us who are in the health profession, any profession you're in, it is our practice to go and search for the information, make sure that we are up to date. This is what we're doing now, making sure we know where the resources are for our community. Myself as a registered dietitian, what I do as a health nutrition, I make sure I find out what's available, where a vaccine might be available, where any other health screening might be available. So we need to take the initiative to make sure we know where those resources are and then find ways to get out to communities. So the barber shop, I know a lot of people aren't going to a lot of those areas, but still the barbershop, the hairdresser, the supermarket, where are the community members gathering? Where is their voice? Even in the midst of physical distancing, find those areas and make sure they're being shared. There might be a youth group that you might need to get the word out to, because there's somewhere on social media that can say, hey, you know, this vaccine is taking place on Saturday, this particular date, and they tweet it out, zoom it out. I probably won't say all the right words, but they get it out to everybody. So maybe it's the youth group that's gonna, the young people, and say, hey, Rev, I know how to get that out. You don't even know how to push the buttons. I got you, okay? So we need to find those new ways, innovative ways to get the word out. And then, of course, like I said, the barbershop, your grocery store, those local areas, wherever we can make sure that we're staying up to date to make sure we can utilize those research. And then partnerships. Make sure that we have partnered. I'm just hearing all the wonderful things that my colleagues here are doing. How have you partnered with the, for lack of better words, the powers that be? Does the health department know you, and do you know them? Does the pharmacist know you, and do you know them? Or go and get to know them, so that if it's happening, you can know about it. Maybe with the last place that they had a vaccination, we should go and visit that place and say, hey, our community didn't know about it. How did you get the word out, so we can go back and share it?
And just to on that point really quickly, it is very important for especially communities that have been historically excluded, right? For us to think through how messages are organically shared, right? And to use those same networks and platforms to get the word out. And that's exactly what my sister is just going through, right? Places where you can get trustworthy information from trusted messengers will definitely need to be tapped into. It's very, very important that not only that we understand the role of Black and Brown scientists in the discovery of the vaccine and the discovery of therapeutics more broadly across coronavirus. I speak the name of Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett. If you've never heard it before, please look her up. Black woman at the NIH who was on the team that partnered with Moderna to design this mRNA vaccine. Likewise, there are experts in your community. There are experts at helping you to break down and decode the science. And there are experts in communication, right? Experts who know how to get word out. And it's important that our people, that we think through what are the time or convenience barriers preventing people from getting vaccinated? What are the language and literacy barriers preventing people from getting vaccinated? What are the transportation barriers that could prevent people from getting vaccinated? We have to think through this social determinants of health framework and lens, where you live, where you work, where you play, where you pray, right? And those are the resources that have to be mobilized to help us achieve a more effective distribution of vaccines and deeper into community.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to get ready to wrap this up. This has been a very informative discussion. A lot of great questions, a lot of great dialogue. Please, as a note, remember you can you can save the chat dialogue. You can save it to your computers. You can go back and reference all these great links of information and resources. And so I think I will be turning it back over to Reverend Boyer to see if you would like to give us some parting words. But before I do, I just want to thank Reverend Brian McAllister for bringing the Black church together, as he always does. as well as Dr. Pernell, Reverend Mitchem, and Dr. Flannelly. You three have been phenomenal. I've learned a tremendous amount of information that I can go out and do my best to be a credible messenger as well. Just as a side note, please, you'll see a lot of things out there, whether it's through social media. Be careful what it is that you're sharing and reposting as well, because people look to you as credible messengers. I know I keep saying it over and over again, but it's really, really important. They look at you as credible messengers, and what you post and what you put out there, people will literally take it as gospel. And so now you all have been equipped with some more information to help decipher fact from fiction. And you can go out and you can promote, you know, people going out and making informed decisions about what's best for them, knowing that they have to be in communication with their own physician and things of that nature. But just please be mindful what is out there. These conversations are so important because we have to dispel the things that are out there that are false. The false narratives, not only do they hurt us because they're simply untrue, but sometimes they perpetuate things that we're trying to change the narrative on going forward. So again, I thank each and every one of our panelists for being on here with us today. I know that many people will walk away far more enriched from this panel today. And so with that being said, I'd like to thank our communications director, Amber, for always doing such a phenomenal job, keeping us on track and making sure that things are run in a way that is so efficient so we can get the best out of our time spent together. With that being said, Reverend Boyer, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I just have to thank you again, Dr. Devereaux, and for Trinity AME for co-hosting this event. Certainly, just again, thank you to Amber, our comms director. Thank you, Crystal, for for really navigating a very, very powerful subject matter. You did an excellent job, sisters and brothers. And of course to Reverend Brian McAllister. Just in closing, sisters and brothers, y'all know what the prophet Hosea said: my people die for lack of knowledge. And sisters and brothers, I can't tell you enough how much, I don't need to tell you, you are all expressing in the chat how much knowledge was gained in this time. And I thank our panelists. You spent time with us. You answered the hard questions. There was nothing avoided. Sisters and brothers in the church, please, please, please utilize the resources that are there. Dr. Flannelly, thank you so much. I mean, and what's going on in Monmouth County and what is available to clergy out there, Dr. Devereaux demonstrates this every day. Please utilize those resources. Also, Reverend Sparks is in Monmouth County, who is working on this issue. Please, please work on this. Dr. Pernell is a national credible messenger for the entire nation on this issue, and definitely for our community. And she is ours, y'all, here in Jersey. She's one of us, not only New Jersey, but also part of the Black church. And, you know, definite respect to your pastor and leadership at your church. So thank you so much. And Dr. You all see this, how she is called to this. This is a ministry. And to my good friend, Dr. Natalie Mitchem, y'all, please, the AME Church and the Health Commission, Dr. Mitchem and the other folks on the AME Health Commission have provided a tremendous amount of Black church resources. Please go to the AME website, to the AME Health Commission website. Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchem, for providing such relevant, on-point Black church talking points, and that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. Now, sisters and brothers, as you leave this place, but never leave the presence of Almighty God, may God's face shine upon you. May God direct your path, And may we all be healed. May we all be healed. Is there a balm in Gilead? Sure enough. And the messengers and the prophets and the healers are right here amongst us. These sisters right here today have given us the power, the knowledge, and the good news, the gospel to be healed. God bless you. May God keep you. May God's face smile upon you. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.